All right, huge developments tonight. President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, will be joining us in just a few minutes. He is telling the Washington Times that the special counsel, Robert Mueller, is agreeing now, finally, rightly, to limit the scope of potential questions he wants to ask the president. Now, the former New York City mayor is also saying that this could result in a possible July interview and Mueller issuing a final report by Labor Day, of course, before the midterm elections. Now, if true, that would be a win for the president. Mueller's original questions were completely ridiculous and insane. Obviously a perjury trap. What were you thinking? It doesn't matter what he was thinking. And today is the one-year anniversary of this Mueller witch hunt. And so far, the special counsel has not provided a single shred of evidence of any collusion. And collusion is not against the law. Now, the special counsel has been so abusive, so corrupt, they are so conflicted that the president and his legal team, they're now rightly going on offense to combat the illicit deep state scheme. Now, the president tweeting earlier today, "Congratulations, America. We're now into the second year of the greatest witch hunt in American history, and there's still no collusion, no obstruction. The only collusion was that done by the Democrats, who were unable to win the election despite the spending of far more money." It's been a year, and so far, all Mueller is doing is trying to get Paul Manafort to flip and bring up completely unrelated tax charges dealing with the Ukraine from 2005 to 2007. It had nothing whatsoever to do with the Trump campaign. And if that's not embarrassing enough, look at Mueller's embarrassing case against the 13 so-called Russian bot companies. That's falling apart. How is it possible, with all of these great attorneys like Andrew Weissman, that he indicted a company that didn't exist at the time? Great job, guys. Also, James Comey telling Congress he didn't think Michael Flynn lied to the FBI. Why did Mueller charge General Flynn anyway? There's something very off about what's happening with General Flynn. Now, this is a monumental abuse of power. It is unlike anything this country has ever seen. And, of course, the media has been MIA. And it's now costing you, the American taxpayers, what President Trump is saying could cost upwards and above $10 million. Now, because of all of these facts, President Trump's legal team is no longer sitting back and watching Mueller and his deep state operatives and this whole disaster unfold. Now, yesterday we did learn that the special counsel is no longer considering indicting the president. Okay, well, we've been telling you this over and over and over, that it's impossible for constitutional reasons, as we have explained. And although this is impossible, there's no constitutional precedent to ever even consider this. There are long-established DOJ guidelines that we have explained already in place. And former New York City mayor, the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, also pointing out that Mueller might not even be able to issue a subpoena because the president's legal team has already handed over 1 million documents. In other words, Mueller already has everything that they have requested. And the only point of a presidential interview is to set a perjury trap. Now, this witch hunt is now a direct threat to this American republic. Mueller is causing irreparable damage to the rule of law in this country. All right, also tonight, the New York Times confirming our reporting that we've had over a year. And part of it is just recent, which is the Obama FBI did, in fact, have a mole inside the Trump campaign. And Watergate, the break-in, was a big deal. Now, don't think for a second the New York Times didn't do this on purpose. Now, they suddenly, decided that they want to tell the truth for once. This was not a simple accident here, as evidenced by the New York Times purposefully, as Andy McCarthy said, burying the lead of the story while trying to spin and cover up for those people that they wouldn't cover for an entire year, those that are involved in all of this illicit activity. Now, what's happening now is that the deep state, they know they're about to be exposed, like we're expecting the IG report. After the IG report, we're going to get the 1.2 million documents that the IG looked at. That will follow. And I believe what's happening is very obvious and transparent. They are leaking information to try to get out in front of this scandal that we have been exposing on this program. In other words, the information they have ignored as they talk about Russia, stormy. Now, the DOJ is trying to protect themselves, leaking this information to friendly media. Oh, the New York Times is nobody friendlier. And as the Wall Street Journal's Kimberly Strassel pointed out, remember, she broke this story last Friday, pointing out these leakers are trying to literally get ahead of Devin Nunes of the House Intel Committee and Congress so they can make all of this sound, well, it's not that bad. We knew about this. Now, remember, Congress hasn't even been able to see any of this information. Why? Because you have the Deputy Attorney General totally conflicted out for numerous reasons, Rod Rosenstein refusing to fork over what is rightfully Congress's role in oversight. He won't hand over. They're obstructing. Now, here's what we mean from this New York Times report. Quote, the FBI obtained phone records and other documents using national security letters, a secret type of subpoena, officials said, and at least one government informant met several times with Carter Page, Papadopoulos, current and former officials said. So we have a secret type of subpoena the Obama FBI used to spy on the Trump campaign. That's on top of the FBI, the DOJ, lying to a FISA judge in an original application and 3 subsequent applications about the Clinton bought and paid for dossier put together by a foreign national using Russian lies to get a warrant to also spy on the Trump campaign. You keeping up with me here? I know. This is the United States of America. In other words, you have all of these top people in the DOJ, in the FBI, not rank and file, the top people, making sure they had every base of theirs covered because their goal was to get Trump by any means necessary after they helped Hillary rig and obviously rig an investigation, exoneration before investigation. And the former New York City mayor, Rudy Giuliani, saying this information could, in fact, blow up the entire Mueller investigation. He's right. Watch this.
In this case, I think we're going to have to look into whether we can challenge the legitimacy of the entire investigation. Maybe a special prosecutor, special counsel never should have been appointed, not based on an illegal leak, not based on a set of facts that go back to, I'm shocked to hear that they put a spy in the campaign of a major party candidate, or maybe 2 spies. And now I'm going through my brain, since you know I was a big part of that campaign. I'm trying to figure out who was the spy. Right. Now I'm wondering, is it this person or that person or this person? Yeah. Now, if there's a spy, they got nothing from it. Look, they'd be able to bring their case right now if the spy had any incriminating information.
The mayor will join us in a second. Here's another consequential piece of information from that New York Times article that we know was leaked. Days after they closed their investigation into Hillary Clinton's illegal use of a private email server, agents then, the same people, the ones that helped exonerate Hillary before investigating her and rigging the investigation, then they began to scrutinize the campaign of her Republican rival. That would be Donald Trump. And just like we have been saying, the small group of deep state actors, they put the fix in, they exonerated Hillary Clinton. We know she committed felonies. The evidence is overwhelming, incontrovertible, would have put every one of you in jail. Then days later, the same people, well, then they went after Donald Trump. They all thought they knew better than the American people. That means you. And if all that isn't enough, well, this part is shocking, could have serious criminal implications. Quote, top Australian officials, they broke with diplomatic protocol, allowed the ambassador, Alexander Downer, to sit for an FBI interview to describe his meeting with campaign advisor George Papadopoulos. Now, in order for that diplomatic protocol to be broken, well, that means that John Kerry and the Obama State Department, from the get-go, had to be involved. They had to know from day one. And that means the Obama White House had to sign off on it from day one. Nobody else in the media is reporting this. So clearly, this goes way beyond Comey and top-level FBI, DOJ, deep state agitators. So the big question for Barack Obama and John Kerry, they need to explain under oath, what did they know and when did they know it? We've raised that question in the past. Now we have a real reason to ask, because there's no way that would have happened without their approval. And as for the DOJ, the IG report that we just mentioned that's coming out, Sarah Carter also with us tonight, breaking huge news. A draft of this highly anticipated report on the FBI and the DOJ's handling of this Clinton email investigation, exoneration before investigation, has now been sent to Congress. Finally, 14, 15 months. And she says and reports tonight, it is extremely long and extremely thorough. Now, Sarah is also reporting that this draft does not contain referrals, but of course that would come after, like in the case of Andrew McCabe. This is a big development. And by the way, it does come with one small catch that we've got to pay very close attention to. Fox News reporting that the FBI and DOJ, we now know they have it. They're now being allowed to view the IG's draft. And that means they will maybe offer instances where they want to redact information. And that means that the deep state would be able to at least attempt to try and hide the truth. Now, this is Rod Rosenstein and the DOJ's MO. What do? They slow walk, they stonewall. And when that doesn't work, they redact under the false guise of national security. It's so disgraceful. But we know that everything they'd redact so far has nothing to do with national security. Had to do with embarrassing details like, oh, James Comey and the FBI didn't think General Flynn lied. Now, we've been saying this for a while, for the longest time. This is why we need a second special counsel that is completely independent from the FBI and the DOJ. Because when push comes to shove, at the end of the day, they are not capable of holding themselves accountable. And the Inspector General needs to hold firm on his report tonight. Also tonight, Robert Mueller has turned over the scope memo about his investigation to federal judge T.S. Ellis III. Remember Andrew Weissman leading the team. That's Mueller's pit bull, and got excoriated by the judge 2 Fridays ago and went after Mueller's team. Why? Because they're going after Paul Manafort. Okay, on what? A 2005 already investigated tax fraud issue that had nothing to do with the election, with the campaign, or even Russia itself or the Russia investigation. The same judge blasting the Mueller team, trying to get Manafort to flip. Remember, Judge Ellis said they want to put the screws to him and make him sing so they can either prosecute or impeach President Trump. We're also following tonight one of the most egregious examples of media bias. Of course, the Destroy Trump media, the press, claiming that President Trump called illegal immigrants animals. Okay, it's not the case. He was talking specifically about members of the deadly MS-13 gangs. Look at some of these headlines from so-called news organizations. They knowingly, purposely took the president out of context to try and smear him yet again. It shows why I have said over and over, news media, journalism in America is dead. And then there's this utterly shameful media coverage. I can't believe this poses as news in the United States, but supposedly it does. Take a look.
The president of the United States has got to measure his words and be more careful about what he says. And it is a very slippery slope when you start dehumanizing people this way. It's what the Nazis did. It's what slave owners did. It's not what Americans do.
But it's the president who's dominating the headlines on the topic after he referred to some undocumented immigrants as animals.
These aren't people, these are animals. So that was during a White House meeting on sanctuary cities. The comment came after someone remarked about MS-13 gang members. The president didn't make it clear whether he was talking about gang members or about immigrants in general. I got to say, immigrant communities hear this as a dog whistle, and they say this is downright dangerous language.
Let's go to the videotape. What did the president actually say? It's so obvious. Listen to the question that he was talking about this vicious gang known as MS-13. Take a look.
There could be an MS-13 gang member I know about. If they don't reach a certain threshold, I cannot tell ICE about them.
No. We have people coming into the country or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals. And we're taking them out of the country at a level and at a rate that's never happened before. And because of the weak laws, they come in fast. We get them, we release them, we get them again, we bring them out. It's crazy.
And today the president responded to this abusively biased news media of yours. Take a look.
You know I'm referring to the MS-13 gangs that are coming in. And I was talking about the MS-13, and also, and if you look a little bit further on in the tape, you'll see that. So I'm actually surprised you're asking this question, because most people got it right. But I'm saying the MS-13, you don't have that where you come from. MS-13, these are animals. They're coming into our country, we're getting them out. They come in again, we're getting them out. So when the MS-13 comes in, when the other gang members come into our country, I refer to them as animals. And guess what? I always will.
Media bias is not the only thing the president's weighing in on today. He was also asked about North Korea's threat to pull out of the nuclear summit. Here's what he had to say about that.
Well, nothing has changed on North Korea that we know of. We have not been told anything, and if it does, that's fine. If it doesn't, I think we'll probably have a very successful meeting. But we have not been told anything. We're just reading stories like you are. We've heard certain things from South Korea, but we'll see what happens. We are continuing to negotiate in terms of location. The location, it's to where to meet, how to meet, rooms, everything else, and they've been negotiating like nothing happened. But if you read the newspapers, maybe it won't happen. I can't tell you yet. I will tell you very shortly. We're going to know very soon.